Being started. This is a review of the Affordable Housing Strategy 2020 and an opportunity for some public input. Administration sort of assisted council by providing some format for us. Generally, we're going to have delegations to start, and then we'll move into some council discussion around the affordable housing strategy, which was referred back from City Council. So City Council has not adopted the strategy. It has been referred back to this Council Committee of the Whole for consideration and additional dialogue. In terms of the delegations, we have a couple, three, that let us know in advance that they wish to present. There are probably others that are here that have some opinion. We'd be happy to hear from you as well. We would ask every delegation to keep their presentations to approximately 7 minutes, give or take. We'll have some time for questions at the end of that 7 minutes. And administration had circulated out to the community and to the public some general questions, and so I'll sort of provide those if you could keep them in mind when you're providing input to council. Generally, do you support the analysis of what the community need is? That was in the affordable housing strategy that went through and identified the overall need that is currently in the community and forecast. Are there broad areas of the strategy that your organization or you are in support of? Are there areas of the strategy where you believe that you might be able to play a role? And are there specific areas of the strategy that they're concerned with? And we'd also be happy to hear any particular recommendations or ideas on how that could be improved. My recommendation to council would be that at the conclusion of this council committee of the whole, we will need to be in a position to take some action and make some action recommendation forward to council, either be directing administration to amend the strategy, to change the strategy, but I mean, ultimately we asked for this to come back, so we would have an opportunity for more dialogue. With, I think, the intention of making some revisions or at minimum hearing from the community before ultimately council making some final decision on the strategy. So with those sort of introductory comments, our first delegation that let us know in advance that they wish to present was representatives of UDI and Build. I see sort of front row there. This gentleman, if you'd like to come forward. And we can pull up another chair by all means. Just one pull off the end of the row there, Scott. Thank you. Gentlemen, welcome. You've all sort of done the council process before, but if you just introduce yourselves so we can make sure that we get your names in the minutes. And anybody that's going to be speaking, the microphones are pretty good if you sort of have it pointing the direction of your face. You don't have to have it right up to your mouth, but if you have it sort of towards you, we'll be able to pick you up. Welcome.
Bob Leslie with UDI. Scott Pravitz with Build Grande Prairie. And Scott Rossler with Helix Engineering.
Welcome.
So I guess first off, I'd like to apologize. I had talked to city manager there a couple weeks ago about, we chatted a little bit about what the best way to kind of put some of our ideas down on paper. And we were doing that, and it was, we all have our own jobs and get busy, and then kind of at the last minute we were made aware of the how you wanted the questions answered, or the 4 points that we're supposed to talk about here today. So we kind of scrapped the first proposal that we were bringing forward and started addressing some of the issues in these 4 questions. So that's what we'll do here today, is just go through those 4 points, and then if you guys have any questions or comments, and that's probably the best way to have like an open dialogue with this from our standpoint.
Sure.
So to get right into the questions, first one was, do you or your organization support administration's analysis of what the community's affordable housing need is? Absolutely, yes, we support that. We have not conducted any of our own research and have no reason to question the assessment pertaining to the needs. The second one was, are there broad areas of the strategy that you or your organization support? Again, yes, we do, and we've said that in our letter that was sent to council on September 24th. And some of our comments on that is that the city's role, as identified in the document, the city should administer land use planning regulations as per the MGA. They should also work with government partners, provincial and federal, community organizations, i.e. Grand Spirit, and other organizations, local business, industry, to develop projects that maximize the local benefit of the initiatives. Another part of the strategy talked about the need for affordable housing as identified in the document. Core housing need is a defined measure of housing affordability. This definition should and does drive the determination of the need in the community. Strategy also defines prevalent groups that rank higher in need. Point number 3 is, are there areas where you or your organization believe you can play a role to support an affordable housing strategy? And again, yes. Partnerships in construction, administration of affordable housing units was in the document. As identified, the city's role is to maximize the local benefits of initiatives. Industry is well positioned to assist in this regard. We have a significant advantage when it comes to design, tendering, marketing, management, admin, overall experience in projects such as these. We understand the challenges in construction and management of projects such as these. We feel like if the city could leverage the development and housing industry, the results would be cost efficient, schedule efficient, administration efficient, and overall successful delivery of projects. Industry would need the city in partnership to deliver projects and units that meet the affordable housing need. Collaboration between the city, industry, provincial, federal government is almost certainly the alternative to reach the most households in need. And we are like, we view this as it's kind of exciting that we would have an opportunity to work with the city on this initiative. And point number 4, are there specific areas of the strategy that you or your organization are concerned with? Yes. The city's goal to develop a nonprofit housing corp without properly vetting a business plan for the initiative was an issue with us. Corporations are expensive, administratively heavy, and difficult to reverse once implemented. The decision to develop a housing corp should not be part of the strategy, we believe, but rather an alternative that is vetted through proper assessment and cost-benefit analysis. So those are our 4 answers to the 4 points. We obviously could go on, but maybe be best if there was questions or comments or.
I guess appreciating, it sounds like you made some effort to reformat. Was there something specific that you wanted to propose that didn't fit in the context of those 4 questions? Or was there something else that you were intending to say?
Well, I guess the bottom line is like we feel like there's this, there's a model that could use what was it? Like a subsidized model. We feel there's a subsidized model option out there that hasn't been explored, and that's our proposal.
Can you describe that a little bit for council?
I think the basics of it would be council would propose to industry partners that there's do an RFP that there's a need for 100 affordable housing units. Let industry meet the needs of the RFP, which you guys have directed with timeline delivers, and the developers.
Can you maybe just pull the microphone up? It might be difficult for everybody to hear it. That's not quite pointed at your face.
Developers or development housing partners could find a way to deliver them products.
I think I'll help out a little bit here, but I think the goal of us always, of UDI and industry and CHPA, has always been to bring. I mean, we obviously agree there's a need, and the goal we feel the city's goal should be to reach as many families, individuals, people in need as possible with the funding that you provide. So the concern we have is it seems like there's only been one option looked at. there's other options out there. We'd be very, very happy to sit down with administration. We've kind of offered that a few times now. There's been models that have been utilized in the past. I mean, as long ago as 10, 20, 30 years ago, that were successful, that provide a lot of the. I mean, that's where the letter from the 24th outlines some of the positives of the alternative models. So those are things that just haven't been explored. We don't feel at this point. Those alternatives and those options. When we run quick numbers here, quickly reach those in need. It's more reactive, faster, and not to say that it's the right option. Even, to be honest, I mean, at the end of the day, if there's instances or situations that we're unaware of, as far as, I mean, we know that there's grant funding that's available through only to private corporations or this housing corp that's there. So, but we want to make sure that that's the right alternative. I mean, we talked about it a little bit, that housing corps are expensive, and they've been tried in lots of other municipalities, and it's just our feeling that that industry has some input that should at least be considered. Whether that's the alternative the council takes, that's up to you. But at this point, we'd love to sit down with someone and run through an alternative to the current presented option. And I think the strategy is a good start, but your strategy shouldn't identify solutions. Is kind of where we were going with this, and that's really the only. Really the only thing that we disagreed with in the strategy is just this immediate reaction to wanting to create a corporation. And at the end of the day, that might be the solution, but that's something that should be vetted through a business plan, and where an alternative would show up, and this would be the look at 2 or 3 different options to achieve the results that you're trying to achieve without committing to heavy administration and trying to get as much of that money from. I mean, it's obviously going to be municipally funded, so to get as much of that money from the municipality into the pockets of those who need it, and that really is our goal.
Okay. Opportunity for questions, Councillor Clayton.
Thanks, Mayor Gibbon. Appreciate you guys coming today. Just a couple questions, and as we're bouncing ideas off here, forgive me while I sort of stumble through this, but I see government obviously having a role, as you mentioned, and industry having a role in this, and sort of to push a little more. I'm curious on what sort of model you think might be best. Is it a model where we sit down with administration and we truly determine the needs in the community, and from there you help develop it, plan it, you find the right builders, you work in a team effort? Or is there a model opportunity where, as industry, you're investing in this? What do you see the options, and how does this play out in an ideal situation?
I think everything you just said is viable, and I think that's the crux of everything that we're talking about today. Is that's you want to explore those options. So if there's an alternative for industry to be invested, it's been fairly well proven out here in the last couple of decades that industry can't meet this need. There's no, it's not feasible. It doesn't work as a business plan. So it's going to require some partnership. It's going to require some collaboration between industry, government, the municipality, in order to get to that point. Whether that is whether it's an industry-owned type of a situation, or whether it's literally just subsidy, they're both completely viable alternatives, and it's something that it's a reactionary, I guess, is maybe the best way to put it, and it's something that it allows you to react very quickly to the market. One of the questions I've always had going through this is what happens when the need's met, and which would be spectacular. And we've talked about this, but at that point you still have pretty big overhead costs. So those are the types of things that we would like to discuss. And probably this isn't necessarily the setting to get into all the details, but definitely something that sitting across the table that, UDI and CHPA would be happy to vet with you.
If I may, thanks. So I appreciate those comments, and on some point, I think it's pretty fair to assume that the city's not in this project to make money. They're there to serve a need. The conversation that you talk about, a collaborative effort, I think is important, because at some point, the expectation of industry is typically to make money. And so if this model includes industry to be successful in what the high goal is in producing affordable housing, without the traditional expectations of making a lot of money. And I've totally understand that the industry right now isn't in a place where everybody's doing well, and so it might be perfect timing in the sense that there's an opportunity between government and industry to collaborate on a project when times are a little slower, specifically in the housing market. So I think that being open to these opportunities of industry investing, whatever that looks like, into a project that benefits the needs is essential. And the other thing that I appreciate you coming here today and mentioning is that I don't think council has a clear definition of what affordable housing is at this point. Affordable housing to me may mean one thing, and to my cohorts may mean something else. So what we expect to get out of this may be completely different than what you see. So you guys are the boots in the street, so you'll know the ins and outs of what affordable housing, once a definition is clearly defined, what that looks like. And so I appreciate, you coming to the table, but I like your answer in the sense that you're open to this could mean that you're just simply developing and building it, or it could mean that industry is investing in it. So thank you for that.
Thanks, Councillor Clayton. Councillor Friesen? Let's see. We can go around. Okay, Councillor Bressie?
Great, thank you, Mayor Given. I just think it's worth clarifying that, in my opinion, the strategy very clearly lays out a definition of affordable housing. And affordable housing is housing that somebody's obtaining for 30% or less of their gross pre-tax income. And this strategy isn't actually, the strategy itself says that this isn't about getting people affordable housing, it's about helping people in core housing need. And the strategy says somebody's in core housing need if they can't find housing that's suitable for the size of their family and the age of their children, so has enough room so you don't have an older child sharing a room with parents, and suitable in terms of it's accessible for people with various disabilities, and it's in decent shape so it doesn't need major repair. And if somebody's not able to find adequate housing that's in decent repair for 30% or less of their gross income, then they're in core housing need. And that's what the strategy says, that it's trying to help people out. And it's fair enough if we want to talk about maybe that definition should change. Maybe that's a discussion worth having. But I think that the strategy really does clearly lay out a specific definition, which I think is an important part of this conversation.
Councillor Palat. And I guess, Council, so we should be trying to direct our discussion dialogue to the delegations that are here. We'll have a number of them. We want to make sure that all the folks that have attended that wish to speak get that opportunity. We'll have lots of time for discussion and debate. And so, as best as possible, while we have a group in front of us, let's try and direct some questions to them so we can have a discussion. Councillor Palat?
Thanks, Mayor Gibbon. I exactly on that. I'm just wondering, I mean, I can appreciate you guys coming in here, but I think we're hoping for some takeaways of what we can maybe work towards. So you guys had mentioned subsidizing, so I'm just wondering if you could, I know it's hard to get into all the specific details today, but, are you talking rent concessions, tax incentives, interest differentials? Like, what are you guys proposing in that, I guess, so we can have some takeaways, or is there some specifics proposals out of that, or?
Okay. Yeah, are you looking for detail?
Yes.
Okay.
So just to be really clear, we came today because after a year of development, a year preceding that of discussion with council in public, there were concerns and there were suggestions that there were better ways to do things. And I appreciate that a big fancy public dialogue like this with cameras and screens and everything is challenging, but this is the format that we've got. And so we need to hear some suggestions, put it out on the table now, and let's get it out there. And if there's something we can act on, then let's act on it.
All right, so I'll give you the two examples that have happened historically or in the past, I think 20 years ago, kind of a thing, where industry, government did partner to make this happen. I wasn't part of it, so I'm sorry if I make mistakes and if things aren't 100% accurate, but it seems like a viable solution. So one of them is through exactly that, is through interest rates. So in the 80s, there was an intentional directive to provide incentives to and literally was solely to private industry, utilizing below prime interest rates. So the government of Alberta was able to provide interest rates at much below prime, which was enough to incentivize projects. So that, and I don't think at this point that's where we're at, because interest rates were a lot different then. So that was one alternative that was there. The other was, and that was managed by, from my understanding in discussions with people that were involved with it, is that was managed by a single individual at the province of Alberta for all of the municipalities in the entire province. So the other alternative is basically subsidies. So if you look at say $500,000 worth of municipal funding, which is roughly what the business plan that you have in front of you today identifies, you take $500,000 of municipal funding and develop, and rather than putting that into administrative costs like salaries and whatnot, you take that and put it in the hands of a partnership to where, for example, the kind of general consensus when you talk to industry and talk to housing providers is around $500 a month takes housing, a core housing need, from not affordable to affordable. So the number, I went to a presentation with Grande not long ago, the number that they had was $700 a month. That's what's affordable. We know very, very well as industry that you can't provide a unit for that. It's virtually impossible with building codes and whatnot the way they are today, and land costs. So if you take $500 a month and $500,000 a year and divide that out over 12 months and take $500, you can reach about 42 families in the first year. So if that $500 ends up in just a subsidy rather than an administrative cost, you've now reached 42 families in year one. So now I completely understand that that's a continuous, ongoing thing. I mean, that's, it doesn't ever get to a point where you are generating your own income. However, it's also extremely reactive, so the risk level is much, much lower. So it doesn't tie future councils into and future administrations into housing corporations and costs and whatnot. So those are the types of things that need to be vetted. I mean, if you take that number up to 1 million and now you've reached 82 families, and it starts to get, it looks feasible. So we've kind of brought that up a few times, and we'd like to sit down and talk about it. It's the nice thing about something like that is you're literally subsidizing the unit. So not my field of expertise, but my understanding is not creating, we talked about it in the letter, but not creating low-income precincts is what we kind of call them, where, if you're going to build one building with 100 units in it and put 100 people in core housing need, that's not as desirable from a success rate as spreading those 100 units across the city. So those are the types of things that do become beneficial. There's other benefits to that as well, and that now, if it's a city-owned property, there's no tax income. Whereas if it's privately owned corporation that just has city subsidy, they pay taxes. So there's lots of benefits. There's lots of things to consider. I can't tell you 100% for sure that it's the right way to go. I mean, it's a business model that hasn't existed for a couple of decades because the opportunity hasn't been there, and there hasn't been a lot of collaboration between municipalities and industry to work together on things like this.
Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you very much, Mayor Given. Thanks for being here, gentlemen. I appreciate hearing your perspective and also your answers as well. It's something that'll give me little things to think about. Yesterday, we had the Grande Prairie Youth Emergency Shelter come in, and they were looking for a build, and they had an ask of $500,000 from the city to help them build a new, I think it was 20 room units that would help house about 30 to 40 youth. Out in the Kensington area, so it's not doing a precinct. So when you said subsidies and the 500,000, it really like clicked into me. But I guess my question is for you guys is 500,000 isn't going to get that thing built, right? Like you guys are going to build it. Subsidy, we're writing a check potentially and subsidizing the cost of building that. But there's other funds that are available provincially and nationally through grants that people can write. And one of the things that I hear constantly throughout the not-for-profit community, especially in regards to housing, is that there's just not enough staff and there's just not enough time to go around and find all the grants and to apply for all the grants and to ensure that they get all the grants. I think part of this housing strategy is set to have somebody there to specifically research the grants, write the grants, find the grants, and turn that $500,000 check that the city may sign over to a housing project into a $2 million check that would help to further subsidize that. Now, that does come with an administrative cost, but I guess my question to you guys is, without the administrative support and with people doing this off the side of the desk and with whatever little time they have in their life, who's going to write the grants and to help further subsidize those houses?
So there will inevitably be some administrative costs. I don't see any way around that. I mean, where that person sits is kind of irrelevant, I guess. But if it's being done off the side of a desk now, then obviously there needs to be more focus put on it. And if that's something that the city of Grande Prairie decides needs to be a focus, then a position's created, whatever. I mean, that's your decision, not mine. But, so if you create a position that's going to focus on grant writing, then that's an administrative cost, and that's a decision council has to make. That's I don't think we're saying that you shouldn't do that. I mean, that's if you feel there's grants out there that aren't being achieved because administration doesn't have time, then there should be someone dealing with that. If there's money available that could be brought into the city of Grande Prairie, then I don't think too many of the community members would oppose that.
So I guess thank you for that answer, and thank you, Mayor Given, for allowing me to follow up. I guess that's kind of the point is right now, both in the not-for-profit industry and in the city, we don't have a dedicated position to find that. You guys are saying here now that that no one would object to us finding a dedicated position to find grant monies to help subsidize it. But the way I see it is that if we have somebody who's dedicated to that and dedicated to networking with the not-for-profits, with industry, and finding something that works for everybody, I think that's of benefit to the community. It's an opinion, but do you see the relevance in that? That if there is somebody dedicated, like maybe another Grand Spirit Foundation, to talk with industry, get you around the table, to talk with the not-for-profits, get them around the table, and also to write the grants, that we can create more housing stock a lot faster and more affordably?
Absolutely. There's I mean, if private industry had if you were running a business and you weren't hitting your market because you didn't have a marketing manager, you would hire a marketing manager. So if it makes sense to have someone write grants, I mean, it seems really unfortunate that we would be missing out on grants because we don't have time. Mm-hmm. That's something that to me is a pretty simple decision. And if same as if I have more work in my company than I can do, then I hire more people. So I would 100% agree with that. I think we're in pretty much full alignment there.
Good to hear. Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Thiessen. Councillor Friesen?
Thank you. So I did hear a couple of things. Mr. Provitz, early on you said you're really opposed to the corporation being part of the strategy. I guess my question is just to drill down on that a little bit. Are you opposed to a solution like a corporation or a partnership or whatever being in the strategy, or is it just the follow-up housing company as it was proposed at council that you're opposed to? Because having the strategy does not necessarily mean we execute on every part of the strategy as it goes along. But I do see benefit to having the idea of this in the strategy. So can you just, I guess, elucidate a little bit what exactly it is within that you're opposed to having the housing company in the strategy?
Yeah, I think for our standpoint was that we're just not sure. Like we feel like there could be different options, and we're not sure how housing corporation would fit into that solution. So again, I think it was just a matter of more collaboration and go, because we don't know. Like we feel like this is a good solution, and obviously administration thought a housing corporation was a good solution. So I don't know which is the best way to go. I think there needs to be some more collaboration and more digging into it to figure out exactly the best solution. On paper, when you look at it, it jumped out to us that it was there was a better way to achieve the strategy.
And I think what I've heard from each of you is that a better way to achieve the strategy would be partnership, and I'm a huge fan of that. So, but what I want to ask you is how obviously
partnership with like subsidies. That was our big, like a subsidized model is our that's our vision. And to answer Councillor Thiessen's question there about units being available, like from people that we talk to in our industry, that they would have inventory ready and now. So there's units out there that could be used for this and subsidized by the city. That could be, again, and I don't know if this is the right solution, but that's when we hear that, like, well, we need to look at this a little bit more.
Yeah. So I do want to follow up on that a little bit, because that from who I've talked to and what I've thought about and studied about over the past couple of weeks, that resonates with me somewhat. But what I would want to know is what, from your perspective, how we may handle this partnership, because I think it could actually be even just a little more robust than flat out just straight up subsidies, and so how would it be managed or governed, or in order to access, if we did have a good grant writer, either at the city, or my preference might be through one of the nonprofits that already exist to assist other nonprofits. How would that all be managed or governed, or how might it be? I'm not looking for absolutes here. I'm looking for ideas.
I think that would be up to kind of the partnership or the collaboration to discuss. I mean, whether if it makes a lot of sense that the city would write the grants, or that a organization like Grand Spirit would. I mean, that's what they do. So if the city felt that they wanted industry to partner with that, industry is always available. Understanding that they're there for different reasons. They have different skill sets. So to leverage the good things that private industry brings with the good things that a municipality brings with the good things that a community group brings, that's where you can really start seeing some benefits, I think. So as far as who would manage it, my gut would be that it would, there'd be a grant writer potentially at the city, or whether you decided to work with private community groups, that part would be handled through there. But that, honestly, I mean, that's pretty typical for RFPs. I mean, you could, it's one of the potential advantages to being partnered with private is you don't maybe have those headaches. So whether if the city wants to take on management of complexes and things like that, then I mean, they always can. It's just whether or not they want to. So, so there is opportunity there to push that on to private industry if you wanted to. Obviously, there's a cost to that either way. I mean, whether it's managed by the city and administration or whether it's managed by private, that's a decision that's pretty easily made. But
Thank you.
Councillor Platt, I see in the queue. I'm just going to ask a question. So, gentlemen, in the plan, I just want to make sure that we're all working from the same numbers. So, the plan talks about the strategy meeting about 37% of the total need to 2030, so under 40% of the total need. Roughly, that puts the total need for new affordable units, ones below market on the definition that Councillor Bressie mentioned, in the total number of about 970. And so the plan is saying that this strategy, all of the tools in here are intended to only address 37% of that need. That suggests that the rest of the need for those people either won't be met or would be met by other means like industry, like other organizations external to the city. So do you have any ideas on how industry will help meet that 63% of need of those 970 units? Like, does industry have the capacity? Are there other tools that you can see that are going to address that, 630 units? Because this plan only addresses 359 units. That's the bar that it's setting to try to achieve. It acknowledges that the community will still need another 630 units that are affordable, 30% below market. So is that clear to industry, and does industry have some suggestions of how that balance of demand will be met?
So if I understand, then what you're saying is that the city had their plan had a solution to address the 37%.
Just so all of the strategies in here, which including exploring financial incentives and tax exemptions to, I would assume, private industry, are only targeting meeting 37% of the need. There's still the other 63% that this plan isn't actually proposing to address.
So did the city have a solution for the other 63?
No.
Okay. Then yeah, we don't. We haven't even talked about that.
Okay. Councillor Platt?
Thanks, Mayor Gibbon. Just, you guys have been using the words collaboration a lot, and that's something that I guess for me, I'd really like to see more of with this, because I do feel, looking out in the room tonight with you guys being, or this afternoon, this morning, I guess with you guys being part of it. Geez, long day yesterday, apparently. But I think without collaboration, we're going to have a hard time getting this over the finish line. So when you guys are speaking of collaboration, one of the things that hits me is there was some very good goals put in this strategy. I'm just curious to see or to hear what you guys would like to see the collaboration look like moving forward on achieving a lot of these goals. Because I think a lot of these goals is goals industry actually probably wants and has wanted anyways. So how do you see the collaboration between the city and industry and stakeholders moving forward being?
Well, from our standpoint, that's what I said in the beginning. Is we're not sure if our proposal is the right thing. We're not sure if what the city's proposing is the right solution. So the collaboration would be obviously working through the challenges that we don't know about. I think there's a lot of work to do on both sides. Specifically, to hear 63% of the need isn't going to be met with this plan. That's something that we need to work through together.
And I guess maybe I'll just ask a little bit, how involved? Like if this starts to be, hey guys, there's an appetite from council that we want to see this thing move forward sooner than later, and we need to get some of these objectives done. Are you guys okay with being in a session for 4 hours every 2 weeks? Like I'm just trying to get a magnitude of like how involved you guys want to be here, because at some point we do need to get through some of these objectives. So just trying to figure out how involved industry would like to be with this, whether it's just conversations like this, or you guys would like to be at committee tables every few weeks and really hammering this thing out, or where you guys see your role in it.
Well, I think it was pretty obvious through the process. We were in all the meetings with Reed and his group. We committed. We were there at every one of them. So if we need to keep going on this, I guess it would have been nice to get through some of this before, but we're here where we are now, and we're willing to work with whatever we need to do.
Councillor Thiessen?
Thank you, Mayor Given. Gentlemen, just a quick question. Part of the plan is, and it's in that realm of subsidizing, is to promote the incentives that already exist within the city. Those two incentives are density bonusing and inclusionary zoning. Have any of you or your members ever utilized or sought out how to have that in your developments? Either of those strategies?
No, but we're very aware of inclusionary zoning, and that is it's a little bit of a slippery slope, we feel. And again, I think this might not be the best place to be discussing these details. I think this is a long conversation and a lot of research and looking at other municipalities that have tried that and different developments that have done that. And yeah, we've looked at it. We're very aware of it. And I think it does have its positives for sure, but there are some unintended consequences with, specifically with inclusionary zoning.
What about density bonusing?
That I haven't looked into that.
I've had a lot of clients look into it. It hasn't made sense for anyone yet. Obviously, in industry, there has to be at least a small margin in it for them to proceed on a project. So, and I mean, that could be just economy. It's hard to say whether that's a result of I wouldn't want to stand here and say the density bonusing alternative isn't a good one, because I don't think it's been looked at hard enough yet to say that. I haven't had a single client come to me and go through the process and decide to proceed with it.
So part of the strategy in our affordable housing strategy is to promote the incentives to ensure that the development community is aware of them and provide support so it is easy to participate in these programs. Moving forward, would the development community be willing to have more discussions with administration on what that could mean for developing more affordable housing units?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Guys, so Council, if you have any last questions for, I guess, our industry partners, would encourage you to get in. Our Q&A session is taking longer, which is great. That means that we're having some dialogue. So just think of any final questions if you wanted to get them in. So similar to Council Thiessen, in the strategy under Goal 2, there's a couple of specific actions that I'm curious whether what you've described in terms of some entity, if there was some money providing subsidies, do you think that could fit within Goal 2 around increase the supply of affordable housing? But they've all got great numbers. 2.1.2.A, engage with industry to consider financial incentives. That sounds pretty close to what you described. Mm-hmm. And then 2.2. There's a bunch of twos and then an A. It says waiver of fees and tax exemptions. Are those things that industry would support? And I guess, did industry have any specific recommendations on the design of those? Because those have been in the plan since it was initially proposed.
No, we would definitely agree with that. Sorry, I'm trying to read these on the fly here.
There's a lot of good in the strategy. I 100% agree with that. There's a lot of things in there that will be of absolute benefit. To be quite honest, for the most part, we're supportive of the strategy. It's the goals of, these are all great and we want to implement them. The first priority and the first goal of the strategy is to create a housing corp. And that realistically is the difference. I mean, and that's kind of what I was trying to say earlier. Creating an entity shouldn't be part of a strategy. Vetting the entity makes sense. That's, review your options, and that may be so we're talking really small changes here at the end of the day. Like once you go through this process and you look at the 2, 3, 4 different alternatives that are out there, and council decides that they want to do a housing corporation, then that's fine. So I'm speaking for these guys on their behalf, but really, I mean, I would wager to say 95 to 99% of the strategy is supported.
Councillor Thiessen?
Thank you very much, Mayor Given. The final question, guys, here. But again, I thank you for being here. One of the other strategies that is mentioned in our housing strategy is to review the limits on small lot development and the potential to reduce minimum lot sizes to reduce the cost of a property and increase density. I mean, there's lots of really good stuff in our affordable housing strategy. And if we were to proceed with, I guess, point one, which is developing a municipal housing corporation, I wouldn't want to proceed without having industry directly at the table. You guys have the expertise, the knowledge, the ability to procure and bring things. And I think it should be an option, even with industry, to stay on the table. I know there's been some pushback for it, but there are lots of ways that this can benefit people. But the key goal, and I think you guys can all agree, is we need to put people in houses, and we need to find the best way to put people in houses. And that can come through incentives, through subsidizing, and also through dedicating like staff time and hours to making it more available and accessible to actually have the funds to create these things. If council were to proceed with this, with the full affordable housing strategy with slight modifications, I would totally love to have industry at the table and helping to develop it, and even to develop a municipal housing corporation, something that works for all parties. Does that interest you in the slightest at all? Looking at all the good things that are being addressed in this plan, I know there's one thing that stands out like a sore thumb for you guys, but I believe that there's an opportunity that for negotiation and for implementation that works for everybody. Would you guys be willing to sit around the table, maybe not under the cameras and stuff like that, but to have that discussion and to work out something that works for everybody in the community?
Yeah, I mean, I think we would be very supportive of that. We just, the Affordable Housing Corp obviously was our biggest contention. How that is set up and how that is ran and how that it's just, you know, we want to make sure that we're making, for the good of the city, for the good of the taxpayer, that we're making the right decision without looking at if there is different options, even if that housing corporation is there, but it's different than how it's set up in the strategy. That might be an option. But the way that it's written and set up now, we're just not sure if that's the best way about addressing the affordable housing issues in the city.
Okay, thank you.
And just one last one. So from your perspective, as much as you know it, I know you can't speak on behalf of all your colleagues in industry. Do you think that there would be industry members that would be willing to form the board of directors of that kind of entity and lend their expertise and knowledge to helping guide the development of it? I mean, basically, if we gave you the keys, you know, so that industry could have influence into how that deploys, would that provide some level of comfort?
I've been asked that question 5-6 times now, and I've answered yes every single time. So, you know, there's a lot of community support within this group. We could list off, multiples of community volunteer boards that our group sits on. 100%. Tell us how we can help, and we will be there.
Okay. Thanks. Any other closing comments, gentlemen? No?
Went over our 7 minutes.
I think that was us. I think that was us. It was the Q&A. Your presentation was within the 7 minutes, and it was the Q&A that followed. Thanks very much for being here. We appreciate the opportunity to chat. Dialogue. So we did have a couple of other delegations that let us know in advance that they wish to come forward. The next was Mr. Len Auger. Mr. Auger? Welcome. And Mr. Auger, if you could, if you're here just on behalf of yourself, then that's great. If you're here on behalf of an organization or entity, if you could maybe just identify that for us, but welcome.
All three. All three. My name's Len Auger. I'm from Grande, Prairie here. And again, affordable housing has been important to me individually and also the organizations I work with. And so for that reason, I'm here to support and promote affordable housing in Grande Prairie. I did do some homework and I read about the plan, and I didn't have too many questions. I think you're on the right track. And just finishing up with these three gentlemen here, collaboration has started. So I think it's over. Over in the sense that I think you're in agreement that you do need to collaborate. I came to Grande Prairie in 1968 to high school. And I started at Procter & Gamble, and I think Yad Minhas was there. I haven't seen you for quite a while yet. You had more hair at the time. And so I've seen the 70s, 80s, and 90s of what went on in Grande Prairie. And fortunately, I worked for a good company, so I wasn't in need of affordable housing or whatever. But I saw it all, and I grew up in it. And yet there's still a need for it. It's an ongoing thing, affordable housing. And so that's why we're sitting here today, really taking a look at what are all the different avenues, things that we can do differently, better, in relation to getting more affordable housing in the community. I did read up on what affordable housing is. I think there is a good definition when you read through all of it. And really affordability, adequacy, suitability is all part of it. Who does it affect? And when you take the renter population, several groups are more likely to be in core need or housing need than others, including Indigenous households, immigrants, seniors, veterans, single parents, people with disabilities, and people with addictions. So the community, the groups are out there that do need help. I did read through the three main categories that the city has in their plan. It's called incentivize, subsidize, and build. And I feel I should add one more category, buy. Why not buy some apartment complexes? Why not buy some duplexes and fourplexes and put people in there if you can't build or there ain't time to build and you need to provide affordable housing? Just a real short story. I went to Montreal in 2016 for a CMHC housing conference, and we got to go and tour some projects. And one of the projects was the City of Montreal, Province of Quebec, federal government, and a whole bunch of big companies got together and bought a whole city block of apartments for low-income people, affordable housing. And they had people that worked in there with the families, single, low-income families, single families, immigrants, the whole group. And they had city workers there that helped people manage, look after the houses. They did the teaching, the education on how to look after homes. And the interesting part is they all were there because they wanted to be there, they needed to be there, and they had to participate in all the activities to better their lives. And when I think back of it, they actually dug up the whole parking lot because most low-income people didn't have vehicles, and they made a community garden. And they all had to look after it as part of the conditional living there. They had daycare at each end of the block where the families could have their kids looked after while they went out to work. So I just thought I'd throw that in, but I also went and read through the 4 statements or comments. I do sit on the CAB, which is the Community Advisory Board for the Housing and Homeless here in Grande Prairie, and I've been on there 4 years, so I get to see and hear a lot of the organization and what's going on, what they're doing to help people in Grande Prairie. I also sit on the executive of the Grande Prairie Friendship Center. And as most of you are well aware, it is an organization that supports and helps Indigenous people and other people, not just Indigenous. And so I get to hear all the stories there about what our programs are doing. And again, we deal with a lot of the low-income families in Grande Prairie. So a lot of the programs we have at the center are working to support these people. So for that, on that basis, I was looking at it and I went through your questions that I was asked to comment to. It says, do you or your organization support the administration analysis of what the community affordable housing need is And of course, on all three questions I wrote, yes, of course. As a member of CAB, I see and hear the needs for the homeless, the need for permanent supportive housing, and also the dire need for affordable housing for many of our people in the city of GP. As an executive board member of the GP Friendship Center, we also see the needs for affordable housing. Many of the client families are of low income, and many of the services we provide are directly or indirectly supportive of our client base. Are there broad areas of the strategy that your organization support? Yes, most of them have to be preventative. At the Friendship Center, we have Baby's Best Start and Head Start. These are programs for families, and we know that most of these families are one paycheck, maybe two paychecks away from living out on the street. So we get to see and hear all that. Are there areas where your organization believes you can play a role to support an affordable housing strategy? And of course, we can and would be able to provide more support services to families that are currently or eligible for affordable housing. And then are there specific areas of the strategy that your organization is concerned with? And of course, the availability of affordable housing for many of the clients. I did read through affordable housing, all the different options, and the three gentlemen that were ahead of me here also quoted many of them. But again, we need to collaborate on all these options that are possible out there. And if we don't do that, we'll keep spinning our tires. And so I did do some homework for myself, and I read up on all the affordable housing projects that have been going on in Grande Prairie. And I think that's well done, but there's room for improvement. So in closing, again, the gentleman mentioned that we, the city, the federal, provincial, and local governments all working together. And I heard a bit of that this morning already. All right. How do we get rental agencies, landlords, developers, and community working together for affordable housing in the city? The key to success has been collaboration within our own corporation, with other orders of government, with housing providers, with community organizations, and with affordable housing residents. It takes a coordinated effort from everyone to deliver safe, appropriate, inclusive housing options for the entire community. People with lived experience are the experts. And so we think about that. We talk about that all the time at all the organizations is, are we talking to the people that need this stuff? Are we talking and asking the right questions to people that are one step away from being homeless out on the street? And I think we need to do that more. All organizations need to be doing that and really getting a feel for what's going on. And because I am semi-retired, I do have time, and I do spend a lot of time with the street people. I do spend a lot of time with the people that come to the Friendship Center. And being involved in CAB, I get to see and hear a lot of what's going on out in the street. And so for that reason, I firmly believe that we need to get better at what we're doing in relation to providing affordable housing to our people in Grande Prairie. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Len. Pretty close to your 7 minutes, by the way. Well done. So opportunity for any questions for Mr. Auger? Any questions for Mr. Auger? Len, if I could, so from your perspective and knowing that, your involvement with the Friendship Center, what role in terms of collaboration would you see the Friendship Center, for example, playing? Are they a builder? Are they an operator? You mentioned support to the families. Are they in, what sort of role would you see that kind of organization taking on?
I see several roles, actually. I think one of them being is because our system, we already have a fairly good idea where these families stand in relation to their income, their levels of support that they need. And because we know that these people are at risk, that I think they could be a good lead to providing the people the resources maybe to help subsidize, maybe to get them into affordable housing. We already do a bit of that indirectly. But I see all organizations that are out there helping people, they need to be involved in the collaboration of what goes on with the affordable housing.
Okay.
There needs to be regular input from those groups and letting the system know if it's working or it needs to be reworked or whatever.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Auger? I don't see anybody else in the queue, so Len, it looks like you got off easy. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Okay, we had another individual let us know that she wished to speak, Ms. Thelma Vincent. Ms. Vincent, if you'd like to come forward. You've seen the routine a couple of times now, so we'd invite you to introduce yourself, any organizations or that you might be here on behalf of. And you've sort of seen that 7 minutes, and we'll try to make sure that we have time for questions from council. Welcome, Ms. Vincent.
I'm Thelma Vincent, and I represent myself for Fetal Alcohol Spectrum Disorder Forward. I operate independently because of the years of experience I've had with them. And I'm now working also with Votive, Voice of the Voiceless, simply because I have the skills for organizing meetings and doing minutes. And we've had a couple of yelling matches, but they're shaping up quite nicely. And so, Your Worship, you should know by now, giving a woman 7 minutes is a red flag. So you asked for it. Okay.
Well, Ms. Vincent, we also want to make sure we're respectful of everybody else here this morning that wanted to have. We want to make sure that we're respectful of everybody else here that wanted to have an opportunity to speak as well.
Yes, I am. And I did finally get the plan downloaded. Being that we operate in an empty pocket, I had to wait till the pension come in so I could get enough paper to do the 29 pages, and I won't print on both sides simply because it's so difficult to follow. But I do have it. I read it. And the honest truth, I don't know what it means to anybody. Operating as I do on behalf of the homeless who have disabilities, on fetal alcohol, who definitely have disabilities, with multiple mental health issues. There is nothing anywhere for us. I spent last winter and all the last of my savings keeping up the 7 people from freezing to death in the street. The general attitude is, they won't freeze out there. They'll find someplace. No, they can't. And one of them is my foster son. And we're facing it again this winter, but I can't do it this winter. Through Votive, we have a member on CAB, which is good. He also has a disability, so we are trying to back up every membership with a supply person in case of them not being able to attend. For that reason, we will ask the agencies that we approach to send the minutes directly to me, and they'll become part of our minutes. Not that I want to invade anybody's privacy, but we have to get this done. With regard to the facts and figures in there, I cannot translate them into anything useful for me. I can go and take an Excel sheet and I can show the income for income supports, Alberta supports, which is about 500 if you don't have any housing, maybe 800 if you do have some sort of housing. Those are definitely people that need work. I do not have perhaps your access to the stats that would tell me how many in this area there are. Those are figures you need to put together. Then you go into AISH. AISH is below poverty level and they're struggling to make it frozen there. I'm sorry, these people have disabilities. They're entitled to a life and an income and decent housing. We cannot continue to neglect them. I sat outside on the Wednesday after Tent City, the concentration camp Tent City, was closed down. And there were 2 still left there crying. Well, we all cried because I have a son in exactly the same position. His disability will not go away. He is limited in what he can do. I spent all of yesterday in court with another client who will likely do time because we don't have the programs to deal with mental health disabilities. There's story after story going on there. However, I deeply appreciate that we have an opportunity to come here. I deeply appreciate Councillor Bressie that we can go into the GP roundtable by having on Facebook for Votive a button, and then we can communicate directly. I need all those things hooked up. We appreciate the councillors that take the time to deal with us, and we ask anybody to come and attend the votive meetings. I see Mr. Ojas, and I'm going after him for working with us now too, which is a good thing. We changed our meetings 12:30 to 1:30 at the lunch at the soup kitchen. That means it's a half an hour of your lunchtime and a half an hour of maybe your work time. Should work out a little more convenient. Besides, in the morning with the numbers on medication, they can't get up in time if we have the morning meeting, and often the meds haven't settled, so they dare not drive or walk to get places like that. Working as I do, I see more, I'll call them abuses, all of these people, because their disabilities are not understood. Through CAB, we're hoping under complex needs to get specialized needs in there. These people that need a specific environment, pet therapy, someplace to work with their hands in the soil, which helps with mental health disabilities. It doesn't help me to run up to Nordic Court and I've done this, do a 5-hour or a 5-page intake of my mental health to find out where you find a psychologist that you don't have to pay for. And this is twice I've done it. So they now have an invitation. They want to ask me something, they better come in with a 5-page mental health report, and then I'll answer them. This is the life we live. We need figures that groundspeople can also work with. This is maybe good for professional corporations, ones that understand where it comes from. Although I have a bit of my doubts. It's a beautiful document. I've framed it and I have it here, and I will be keeping it. I may someday understand it. We have on votive now those with disabilities. One is a college grad, a computer tech. Thank goodness we have capable people. We have a couple Native people coming on, hopefully. It's a very volatile population that we work with. We need simplistic things, but we need you to know that our needs for housing are urgent, very, very specific, and that we have to work in mental health follow-up. For the time this year, correct me when you need to.
Pretty close.
I have experience in municipal work. Was anybody here alive in 1950? Oh, don't finger point. Okay. That's where I started in, and I have my papers and my letters for municipal government. So I know it can be done. It's just that you have to be aware of the problems. FOIP gets in the way because you can't talk about this, you can't talk about it, you can't do that. We come from a country where we share knowledge of each other. We keep quiet when it's detrimental, and we use it to help people where we need. We need to reestablish that atmosphere of communicating. If you have a question on what I really mean on those things, please ask up. Councillor Friesen and Thiesen. Oh, Friesen and Thiesen. We've corresponded with. I am very abrupt at times. I'm starting to realize that, and maybe some of what I say is not coming across the way I mean it, but I am direct, and I am at my wit's end what to do with all the people that are freezing out there. We had a girl at French's Centre in a wheelchair. The last bit of snow came. It ended up by pooling our resources, and heaven help us if we go to an official agency because they couldn't talk about it. Who are we, eh? But she went to Oasis. The wheelchair was left at the top of the stairs. We got her, and they helped, down onto your little mat on the cold cement floor in her clothes, which were not exactly dry, and she nearly froze to bit. Thank goodness Parkside has opened up again. But please share your information with us. We want to use it, but we are aware of what's going on, and perhaps you aren't because you aren't out there with them. We need that
Spencer,
support.
we're at about time now.
We need to work closely with you. We need it urgently.
Okay, thanks, Ms. Vincent. Any questions for Ms. Vincent? Don't see anybody ringing in. Then thanks very much for helping council establish the complexity of the situation that we're dealing with. Thanks, Ms. Vincent. Thank you. Okay, so that's the end of the delegations that let us know in advance that they wish to present to council on this topic. Is there anybody else in the room that wish to make a representation to council on the affordable housing strategy? So we've got 2 hands, and so we'll start at the front. Dan, yeah. And we'll work our way back. Again, you've sort of seen it. I have a sense what organization you two are representing, but if you just maybe want to introduce that for everybody else who might not know.
Sure. I'm Dan Wong, Chair of the Board of the Chamber of Commerce, and this is Tanya Oliver, the CEO of the Chamber of Commerce. So we were asked to at least sit in on this session for Council Committee of the Whole, just to talk about the affordable housing strategy. I have gone through the report, and I want to address one of the concerns of our members. First of all, the report is very well written. That strategy is very comprehensive. I really appreciate the fact that it talks about leveraging the agencies, and it does define the problem very well, especially if you look at it in context with the business plan and the other documents that were released earlier. Objective number 2.4 on page 12 basically says lead the development in affordable housing. I think the city just needs to be very cautious of how, where it wants to support affordable housing. There's a big difference between supportive housing and those people that live in extreme poverty. And then there's just the affordable housing issue. Table 5, it's really, or sorry, the table on page 5, it's really unclear when you look at all the data, whether we're talking about specifically city-owned property or if it's properties citywide. So that was one thing that we thought should be cleared up. However, I do want to address strategy 1.1.2. That's the one that says develop an entity that takes on projects that require greater autonomy. And we really just want to offer some caution there. Autonomy can sometimes mean less transparency, and accountability to taxpayers it should be a major priority for councils, and that's one of the issues that was raised to us by our members. The caution that we want to talk about is, first of all, the report shows the relative size of the issue, which is huge. You know, it basically says 2,475 units are needed to address the issue in its entirety, growing to 3,000 by 2030. That's a massive number. 683 right now are on the current waiting list, so we'll just deal with that issue, which is still a big issue. But it's such a big issue that we agree that the city definitely has to play a role in this. If you just try to leave it to private industry, they probably won't be able to meet the need because there's just too many barriers in place. So the chart that showed, you know, the different categories, I thought that was very useful. We'd like to see more of a breakdown on that, and maybe subsequently as you get into more of the details of actioning on this plan. But one of the concerns we want to talk about is just the city competing directly with private industry on projects. What you're going to probably see is opposition from builders, because the housing corporation would have several advantages over private industry, and those advantages they make for a very unlevel playing field. So first of all, staff are paid by taxpayers. There's potential that all provincial or federal grants that could go towards affordable housing would go to the municipal corporation, because there's only so much money in the pot. Cities don't have to pay for permit fees. They can bend the development standards, and I know that wouldn't be the intent of City Council, but that has happened on almost every single municipally owned project. They don't have to meet landscaping requirements. Eastlink is a very good example of how you got building occupancy before you pave the parking lot. You know, and a private business would not be allowed to have those kind of considerations. So the unintended consequence of the city directly competing is that the development industry may turn its back on the problem. And it's such a large problem that you can't afford to have that happen. So one of the things we do want to support is strategy 1.1.1, which is develop an internal city resource to work on housing initiatives. It seems to be a more reasonable step to just have one staff member dedicate 100% of their time on this problem. It is a big enough problem that you're probably going to be able to dedicate one staff member to it. the previous business plan that I know is not on the table today, but it did contemplate 3 staff ongoing forever. And I know UDI just talked about the problem or the potential outcome, which is you solve the problem. I don't think this problem gets solved, mainly because if you look at just the information in the report, at 2,475 units that are needed, growing to 3,000, that means your problem's growing at 1.4% per annum. Okay, so even if you look at the 683 on that waiting list, that's 10 more units that are required every single year just to address that waiting list. If we look at the value of those properties at 683, and I'm just using an average value of $200,000 per unit, that's $136 million worth of construction that needs to be done to address that issue, growing at 1.9 million per year. If you look at the 2,475 number, that's 495 million in construction projects. So it's such a sizable project that the city can't possibly tackle that. I looked at just a quick scenario. I ran some quick numbers. If the city spent $10 million in capital over the next 5 years, you could address the problem and fulfill 50 of those units. That would cost the city an additional $2.5 million in wages alone. So $12.5 million, and you've taken out 50 of those units, but the problem has grown by 50, based on that 1.4% per annum rate. So it's a non-sustainable way of addressing that issue. So I looked at the other alternative that was pitched, which was just going with an affordable housing subsidy and using the 30% of income number that's in the report and based on Alberta provincial government numbers, even at $36,000 per year, which is roughly what a person would make at minimum wage working full-time hours, the majority of people fall within $200 a month of being able to meet that need. So $2,400 per year. And that's much less than what our friends at UDI had come up with. So if the city had $500,000 to spend per year, and they used it just on rent subsidies at $2,400 per year, that would address the problem by fulfilling 208 units. And that could be fulfilled relatively quickly if you have the entire private industry backing you. So on the flip side of that for the city, at 208 units at 200,000 each, and just using the municipal portion of what you guys get back at property taxes, that would generate about $400,000 a year in property taxes. So your net cost is only $100,000. If you also look at the fact that an entire housing unit should not be all affordable, and it should probably be 50-50 to get a good mix of a socioeconomic status in there, you can double that number. So you actually start to see a return of almost $300,000 instead of a cost. That's just one option, but that's just running quick numbers that I scribbled on a pad here during the meeting. You can already see that that's a more reasonable strategy than costing the city $12.5 million to just take a little chip out of the problem. So just to summarize here, I think it's really clear that the city needs to address the problem, and maybe you focus on that really hard to house area, the people that need supports, the people that have some mental issues. You definitely need to work with private industry because you don't want them to turn their back on that problem. And there are other incentives that were listed in the report, and we would definitely be willing to participate in any future meetings that would discuss possibilities for that. Just to close from my side, I just want to say that I believe that strategy is very comprehensive. The report was very well written, and other than that one portion, I think we're very supportive of what the city has put forward.
Okay, thanks very much, Mr. Wong. Any questions for the delegation? I don't see anybody ringing in. Dan, I just wanted, can you go through the number about the 36,000 a year? Appreciate you're doing some quick math, but can you sort of reiterate what you saw that as a relation to, like that?
Sure. So if you just took 36,000 a year and you took 30% of that, that's $10,800 per year or $900 per month that a person should be paying for their housing.
just so in terms of what population do you think makes the 36,000 a year?
Well, no, that's just on. I just chose that because that seemed to be the weakest end of the scale. I don't know that necessarily it is. I haven't run all the numbers for every single category, but on the weak end of the scale at $900 per month, and the average rent in Grande Prairie is just slightly above that. It's actually about $990 for a bachelor or even a basement suite. So, that person's only $100 away from being able of falling within that affordable range.
If they're making 36,000 a year.
If they're making 36,000 a year, that's, if you go $15 per hour times 40 hours a week, you're roughly doing, actually that's about 30,000 per year. I think it's very unlikely that you're going to find a person making that amount, but the 36,000 a year came from the Alberta government website.
Okay.
It was actually 35.5 and I rounded it up.
Councillor Palat?
Thanks, Mayor Gibbon. Thanks for coming in today, guys. I'm just, when we had a council roundtable chamber one, we chatted a little bit about red tape, and I'm just kind of wondering what your guys' thoughts are on some of the initiatives and what the chamber would like to, or potentially if the chamber wants to be involved. There's been lots of talk around collaboration today. If that's something the chamber would want to be involved with moving forward, and if you guys see some opportunities for some red tape reduction within this report.
Definitely. And the other thing that the chamber could offer, other than participating, is we might be able to help facilitate some of these meetings as well, because we do have a large database of membership that we can reach out to. And sometimes if it's something that's city-led, people feel that there might be a bias towards the result already. And, the chamber can act as a third-party, neutral party.
Thank you for that.
Councillor Bressy.
Great. Thank you for coming in. I really appreciate it. And I frequently brag about Grande Prairie in terms of a lot of colleagues I've talked to across the country. Business community is very oppositional to a lot of social issues, is at least what elected officials feel. And I really know that our business community is really looking out not just for the needs of your members, but also saying we've got a social conscience and we want to make this community better. And I heard that in the early delegation before. I really appreciate that and brag about Grande Prairie frequently because of that. Something I'm honestly really struggling with is the role of city tax dollars with affordable housing in terms of it's arguably more of a federal provincial role in terms of there's a lot of in terms of we serve a large region. I've heard from people that have come from all over the place to Grande Prairie, and it's hard for city taxpayer dollars to shoulder that. And on one hand, I struggle with that. On the other hand, it's a clear need in our community, and we as a council have a clear responsibility to create a viable community for all members, no matter what their abilities and no matter what their fiscal situation is. And I'm really struggling in terms of it's really clear that the city should have a role in terms of reducing red tape, in terms of supporting nonprofits, supporting industry as they're doing things. It's really clear that we've got some very task-oriented responsibilities with this, but I'm really struggling in terms of how much municipal dollars we should actually put in terms of if we are doing a rent subsidy program, should we be throwing in municipal dollars with that, or going after other level of government and philanthropic or other dollars for that? And in terms of the issue with municipal dollars is if city taxes go up, it's a struggle for everybody, including many of these people that we're trying to help. So I wonder if you have an opinion on, should we be looking at setting aside ongoing budget resources for this beyond just the staff people to help enable other groups, or should we be just going after other dollars?
Yeah, I think it's a multi-pronged approach, but one of the things that I disagree with some of the other comments that were made is giving tax incentives or waiving taxes on affordable housing. I think there's the ability for the city to create a sustainable system by allowing private sector or giving private sector incentives to get into that market, and then collecting the property taxes to pay for that portion of the project. The other thing that could be done is, I didn't factor in the portion of property taxes that goes to the government for what they call their school tax, and we all know that doesn't go to the schools directly. It just goes into the general revenue. But I think there's a case to be made to claw that back and add that to the 400,000. That would gain another 20% or so, and that takes out of the numbers that I generated, from $400,000 to $480,000 per year in tax revenue, that almost breaks you even on a program like that.
Councillor O'Toole.
Thank you very much, Mayor Given. Dan, I just got a question. You mentioned that there would be a 10% increase on housing needed every year. Did you incorporate people going in there, subsidizing for a couple of years, or living in an affordable, and then because of their jobs, maybe they're apprenticing, family, that they're actually able to make more money and move out of there? I know I went through that process myself, and I was able to get a mortgage cheaper than the rent when it went up.
Right. So I said it's actually a 1.4% increase, not 10% increase.
Okay, sorry.
It was a 10-unit increase based on the 683 that's on the Grand Spirit waiting list right now, and I used the numbers that are in your report to generate that.
Thank you.
Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you very much, Mayor Given. Thank you, Tanya and Dan, for being here on behalf of the Chamber and your members, and also for your good presentation. Just scribbling down a few things myself here, and it's really about affordability. With the new provincial budget, we have ACE rates are frozen for the unforeseeable future. We have a reduction in miners' wages below minimum wage. Inflation rates continue to go up at a rate projected at least this year, and the low end about 1.9%, so that affects affordability as well. Vacancy rates. When our vacancy rates are at 1%, it's great for business, but it's bad for the consumer who needs to pay for that because inevitably their rent goes up because of market demands and scarcity. Then there's also single families with kids. So a single mom or dad who has 2 kids may make $36,000 a year, but those 2 kids are going to impact the amount of spending income that they have based off of like their core needs, their core housing needs, food, education, school supplies, exercise, getting involved in sports. Makes it very, very difficult. So I agree with you that that perhaps providing subsidies to private industry is one tool in the toolbox, but as Councillor Bressie intimated earlier, it just seems like it's going to become a perpetual thing. Now, even if we're only spending $100,000 a year, that's $100,000 every year, and that's just to fight back the tide. So how do we stem that tide? I guess as the years go by, it gets more and more expensive to live, the wages don't rise, and our middle class shrinks, and affordability becomes harder and harder, and especially for those people who are suffering from mental health illnesses or living within abject poverty based on life circumstances, it gets harder and harder for them to, I guess, essentially pay for the roof over their head, and then we get overflows like Tent City and stuff. How do we stem that tide without perpetually spending like municipal tax dollars on rent subsidies?
I think that's almost a deeper question that has to be answered as you get into like further subcommittee meetings. One of the things that was identified was just looking at municipal standards, the MDP and the LUB. One of the issues that we've come across in the firm that I work with is secondary suites and up-down duplexes. Those are 2 products that would increase the stock of affordable living, but they're not really supported in the city. There's a lot of limitations on them, and I think most of the concerns come from parking issues. So instead of dealing with a parking issue, what we did was we just limited the number that we're allowed to put in. There might be other ways to address it. It just wasn't discussed as thoroughly as it should have been.
Okay. Yeah, no, that works. Thank you.
Dan, I wonder, do you have any perspective on how the city might leverage the assets that we currently own with respect to affordable housing? You know, there's Hearthstone Manor and some other properties. And they currently, some of them, return a surplus to the city on an annual basis that is reinvested in the Affordable Housing Reserve. Do you see any better ways to leverage those existing assets?
I honestly haven't had a chance to look at that. And like I said before, the city does have a role to play, and I'm just concerned that this municipal housing corporation doesn't necessarily have more powers than the city has right now. It just becomes another entity that doesn't have the transparent process that the city has. So, you know, Hearthstone Manor is owned by the city right now. I think it's in partnership with another organization. But
it's operated by Grand Spirit.
Okay, Grand Spirit, yeah. So, you know, you can continue to do those types of things under the current model.
So have the city construct projects just as a city department.
Right.
I don't see anybody else in the queue with questions. Thanks very much for being here, representing the Chamber's views. Certainly appreciate it.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else that wishes to come forward? I think I saw one here, and then we'll go back there. Yeah. Again, if you can just introduce yourself and who you might be representing, if any organizations. Welcome.
Good morning. My name is Lisa Watson. I'm the Vice President of the Grande Prairie Youth Emergency Shelter. Thanks for taking the time to listen 2 days in a row. One of the things that we had a chance to overview the strategy, and it's very well done and very detailed, and I'd like to commend administration on doing a really great job on that report, and I know there was a lot of consultation that went into it. One of the areas when we were going through our delegation for last night in our request for our new build with the shelter, we were trying to align the 10 new units that we're potentially doing with the build with the affordable housing strategy. And upon searching through the document, there was no strategies that were targeting youth at all in Grande Prairie. I know there is some identification around units that are accessible as well as seniors units, but unfortunately youth were not targeted in that. And ultimately we'd just like to give some feedback regarding that. There is a bit of a demographic right now in Grande Prairie that's not, or it's difficult for them to find housing or affordable housing, and that would be between the ages of 16 and 18. Ultimately, a lot of youth that come into care, if they're not in care with child and family services before the age of 16, there isn't a lot of services that will cover to help them find housing between the ages of 16 and 18. And ultimately, trying to attain a lease in a market when you're under the age of 18 is pretty much impossible. So finding some designated housing and affordable options for youth within Grande Prairie would definitely be a benefit to include within the strategy.
Thanks very much. Any questions? Councillor Bressie.
Great. Thank you for coming in. Thanks for highlighting that. I'm just curious. Do you guys have a sense of how many youth we might in that 16 to 18-year-old range that we might have in Grande Prairie right now that are struggling to find housing?
Unfortunately, I don't have those numbers with me, Councillor, but it's definitely something we could get. I know it's not a large population, but when you tie in preventative measures at early ages, it helps to prevent chronic homelessness down the road. If you're talking to individuals that are street engaged for long periods of time, there is a direct tie back to homelessness experienced at youth. It's definitely a number we could get for you.
And I'm also curious, yesterday we heard that you guys absolutely do not turn kids down from your emergency shelter services. You make it work. Is that your transitional housing? You got a little bit of that right now. Is that an area that you're turning kids away from that are struggling, or have you been able to fill the need of the kids that come to you for that particular service?
As far as the transitional piece after 18, that's something we continue to work with them through the Youth Navigator program. There is the 4 beds that are available to transition them after they turn 18. Those 4 beds could definitely be increased to be able to support them.
Thank you.
Councillor Friesen.
Thank you. Good morning, Ms. Watson. Thank you for coming again this morning. It's not probably somewhere you want to spend a lot of your week as in council chambers, but anyway, we appreciate that this is such an important matter for you. So I just have a couple of questions. I'm not sure that I agree with you that this doesn't address, but I want you to tell me why I'm wrong. So the 16 to 18-year-olds that are having difficulty finding housing, are they typically emancipated, or would they be?
It depends, right? Because we would see some people that come through, or some youth that come through at like kind of over that 16 mark. So no, they would be independent.
So they're independent. Okay. So how would this not, if we're able to provide additional housing in the form of, I mean, you saw in the report, there were some bachelor suites, and for individuals who are need affordable housing, why would they not be able to?
Between the ages of 16 and 18?
If they are independent, yeah, why would they?
Because they can't enter into a lease agreement before the age of 18.
Okay, so that's a special consideration potentially. We do know that youth, even older youth, 16 to 18 or even 18 to, depending on who you're talking to, that age may go up to mid to late 20s even, or 24 or 22, as we've just seen our foster system in Alberta. We just saw cuts from the age of 24 to 22 for those additional supports. So in this strategy, we're not talking about supportive housing, or the supports that come along with it, but just the housing. So are you suggesting that the supports should also be addressed in this strategy?
I don't believe that your affordable housing strategy addresses the support piece. I believe that that comes onto agencies that are supporting youth in our community.
Right.
I think it's more about increasing accessibility for youth that are between that 18 to 22.
That helps.
So
helps me to
it
understand.
might be a way of maybe engaging with some landlords or some builders to say, okay, we're going to designate maybe one apartment within our complex that would be just specifically for a youth, but they could bypass that. You know, I'm under 18, or I can't pass a credit check
and all those sorts of things.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. I appreciate your answers there. That does help me out. Thank you.
Okay. You're welcome.
Thanks, Councillor Friesen. Councillor Bressie.
Great, thank you. I know that I've had conversations with the organization about the issue of the province being hesitant to fund emergency shelters and these kids that need emergency shelter services getting lost in the ministry shuffle and who's responsible for them. I'm curious in terms of these 16 to 18-year-olds finding places to live. I think I have a good understanding of the issues I have in terms of signing a lease and getting somebody to vouch for them and all that. But in terms of programs that are out there that would help older individuals get income support or get subsidized renting and those kinds of provincial programs, are they getting lost in the gap there? Are they eligible for those same programs that they'd be eligible for when they're older?
After the age of 18, they would be eligible through the Housing First program.
But they're not before they're 18?
Not before they're 18, except for the city does support the Youth Navigator program and that transitional house with the 4 beds. So ultimately there is supports there. Expanding them couldn't hurt.
Right. And so I guess what I'm trying to understand is, are there more of those supports that become available when a kid turns 18, or are they just different supports when a kid turns 18?
I would say it would be more supports once they turn 18 because they would be able to access through the Housing First stream.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Bressie. Lisa, I know that you have some experience that you just referenced Housing First. So from your perspective on this, can you give a sense of how many youth or individuals, I mean, maybe it's not youth, but just what's your knowledge about Housing First and how it does interact with, are all Housing First clients housed in properties owned by agencies or the city?
Ultimately, I guess I wouldn't be the expert in that.
No.
I guess your CSD department could probably speak a little bit more on behalf of that.
Sure. I'll ask them that question. Any other questions for the delegation? Seeing none, then thanks very much for being here.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time this morning. Yes, in the back corner, come on down. Thankfully, everybody's sort of seen the routine now, and so, just to introduce yourself so we can make sure that we get it for the minutes, and welcome.
Certainly, thank you. My name is Val Wathanak, and we currently own 7 apartment buildings in Grande Prairie, and we work with Centrepoint, we work with Northreach. We have people in our buildings that are on AISH. We've dealt with the city for probably the last 4 years. I hear industry saying that they want to build a building and scatter the hard to house people in the building. So our experience with that, for example, one individual that we put into our building, within 24 hours, he went through 1,000 liters of water, and he had 4 individuals that were strung out on drugs throughout his apartment. I had to go in with a plumber to remove them. One person was violent. We had to evict the individual, and according to the Alberta tenancy laws, you have to give 14 days notice. You have to go to the courts. Those individuals can stay in your buildings for up to 2 months at least. And then when we finally got this particular individual out of the unit, he stayed there for the next 2.5 months, letting people in, doing drugs on the steps, banging on our property manager's window when she'd pull up to try and show the unit to another person. In our experience, the city does supplement their income and will do repairs, but they don't pay for the 2 months that you may be repairing a unit. We've had $17,000 worth of damage done to one unit with someone manufacturing drugs. It's very slippery slope of personal liberties, of when you can go in the units and what they're doing. We found 25 wallets in that particular unit that was stolen. Then the people of the ring that the individual was involved with, they started phoning our office to get their items back. The RCMP were there. They said, you know, we don't have, I forget what it was that they wanted. He started coming to our office. I've had my property manager beaten up by homeless people that have gotten into our buildings. Since we started working with the city, we're at $52,000 in bad debt for 2 years in a row. So I feel that the city needs to deal with the homeless. I agree with Mr. Auger on his plan to have a village to grow crops, to teach them welding, to get them to the heart of their issues that they have. I believe private industry would be good to subsidize some, but it's when you have even one individual who's been clean for 3 years. Like, we have success stories. That's why we were trying to deal with this. And he's like, I hate to complain because I lived on the streets for 4 years, but those people need to go, you know. And then you have your vacancy rates, and people don't, your building becomes known as, with the traffic coming in and out, we've had people cut holes in our walls to live inside with their belongings. I've had 4 people OD on our doorstep and inside the building with people letting them in. It's a much larger issue than building the building. If you don't have 24-hour support there, how can you help people? It's a huge problem. I'd like to be involved in the committee. I've just been very busy with other personal things. But that sounds good, but the implementation of these things is difficult, especially because of your liberties. We had an individual who went to cancer treatment, and these people moved into the house. We couldn't get them out. They dismantled the washer, the dryer, holes in the walls, and you never recover all your costs from that. So I believe the solution, in our opinion, is to have the city, in coordination with organizations, to build apartments for the street people, for the homeless people, deal with that problem. Because even in Inverness, I have people that come to rent at our buildings that are showing pictures of people overdosing in their hallways when they get up at 5 o'clock in the morning. The heaters that are in the buildings of all across Grande Prairie. It's not just downtown where our buildings are. It's a problem that's across the whole city of Grande Prairie. And it's difficult to tackle. We need more supports. We need more people. And in my opinion, with people that are mental health issues and are severely drug addicted, to put them in an apartment with a kitchen and a toilet is asking for disaster. We've had 2 of our buildings flooded by them just putting things in the toilets, and people are away, and so now you're dealing with 4 units that you have to repair. And some people that are assisted, they have no income. They'll never pay you back. The one individual, for the $17,000, he's paying us back $150 a month. It's a very difficult situation, and I feel that the city and the organizations need to come together and support these people, build buildings, have supports where they can learn skills, deal with their mental health issues, and move forward with their lives.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for the delegation? I'll maybe just start. So you are a private
Yes.
property owner.
Yes.
Do you have, how many, you said you have 7 apartments. How many units is that roughly?
We have 7 apartment buildings and 32 single-family homes, which are comprised of duplexes, 4plexes, 3plexes, and we've had them in and it's not just the homeless. We had an individual separated from his wife, moved into a basement suite, and he gets on drugs, and pretty soon I have this woman living in there with cat feces all throughout the thing. He's ran away because he can't get her out of there, claims to be dead. I have to go to the courts to evict her. It could be you, it could be me tomorrow. You could go to a party, someone slip you something, or you have a head injury, and it's just so complex. It's hard to see when I've seen people that have good jobs making $120,000 a year to pretending to be dead because he's got someone living in there and he's lost everything. His family, it's awful.
So how many units do you have under management, like including The
We
apartments?
have 140 units.
So you currently have 140 units, and how many of those, roughly, and I can appreciate that it probably changes over time, but how many of those do you think would be clients that are receiving subsidies or support?
22 currently.
So out of that total number, you have 22, and that's the challenges that you've been facing. Okay, thank you. And so just to be really specific, so do you see? It sounded like you were specifically saying the city needs to build units. And
Organizations. We need to have some type, we feel, supportive housing for the mentally ill and the severely drug addicted people to get supports and help. And my vision would be that they have a room, they have a community kitchen, they're accountable, they are given some type of job, something to do, try to train them, try to make them productive people in society.
So in your experience, there's two different things in setting aside the who owns a building, but the design of buildings,
I think
would it be
what Mr.
typical or would it
was
be?
saying about Montreal with, digging up the parking lot and planting a garden. We planted a garden this year on some of our other property and acreage, and we donated 800 pounds of potatoes this year to various organizations in the city. And now they're going to come and help us plant next year. So the elder shelter is coming. Some people from Rotary House are coming. So we're trying to walk the walk and do the talk, but we're not skilled. And when our staff is being beaten, it's unacceptable. We need to do something. And I believe that we need more support.
So is it fair to say then that the challenge for the private sector, from your experience, your personal experience, is that that the dollars in terms of subsidy are only a part of the challenge?
Well, you get your rent, so you have $1,000 and they're paying the $500 a month, but then they totally trash your unit. And then you're looking at, from $2,000 to $17,000 worth of damage. That's not totally covered by the city because there's wear and tear, plus they don't pay for certain things, a certain amount of rent and what have you. And then you've got that unit empty for a couple months, and the people that are around, that we had one individual that was breaking into other people's apartments. So now those people are moving because they don't want to be in a building where they don't feel safe.
Councillor Plott.
Thanks, Mayor Gibbon. Appreciate you trying to work with people that are in this vulnerable spot. I mean, it's not an easy spot to be a landlord. I'm just kind of curious, when you because you have the opportunity to vet all the applications that come in.
We do, and then we have some people look good on paper. I'm a welder. I'm making $120,000 a year. You phone, you have a cell phone number, so you phone, they say, yes, they're working for me, everything's fine. And they get into your building, and it's their friend that gave that to you, and they haven't worked in 2 months, and now they're addicted to crack. And then we were trying to work with the city, and not the city, but the Center Points and the North Reach, but they don't have the staff and the support to be there all the time. And then when they go there, which was another thing that wasn't explained fully, if the participant getting the subsidy does not want you in the unit, they don't have to. And then according to the Alberta Tenancy Board, you have to give at least 24 hours to get into the unit. And like I said to the lady on the phone a couple of times at the Tenancy Board, they're trashing our apartment. We can hear them doing this damage in there. No, you can't go in. You can't. You can phone the RCMP and try to get them out. And a lot of the time, the damage is already done by the time the RCMP get there.
So as a landlord, I'm just kind of curious on, and I can appreciate we've had rental properties in the past, and you can get some tenants that make it just not fun, and you just maybe don't want to get into that space. But, if you've got 22 currently, I can appreciate you're seeing some bad ones. I'm sure you have a lot of success stories out of the ones as well. Yes. And that's where I'm kind of going back and forth with this mixed market and the concept of it. But I'm wondering, out of your 22, if you had 2 or 3 bad ones, and I 100% agree with you, I think some folks just need to be put into a mental health facility or the proper facility. But I don't want to see us just throw the baby out with the bathwater here if we've only had a handful of people that are potentially negative if you've had that kind of success with the other side of it. So
we're currently this month we're evicting 4 people for various things. So it's just getting more and more difficult on our end to maintain the relationship. And another thing that happens is that someone gets supported on from different organizations, and then they graduate. And so that's wonderful. They've got their life back together. They're paying the rent. And then 2 months later, they fall back and the support has gone from the organization. And so then you end up with the damages to your unit. So do you keep that person in the unit after they've graduated and there's no support from any organization to pay for damages? It's a difficult, from a cost perspective, and it's a difficult situation to be in.
And so just one more question if I can. Just when you have the issues with the hard to home, is there, because I don't know a lot about Centerpoint and the agencies, is there a lot of dialogue back with them to identify that that these,
depending on the worker, but there's also a lot of turnover within that industry. As you can imagine, they have a very difficult position of people that they're dealing with. And for one individual, they never checked the unit where they dismantled the washer and the dryer, and the individual was gone in Edmonton. Their workloads are high. But if we had a building where there was 24-hour support with people there, and they had a communal kitchen and they had communal washrooms, it would be easier to ensure that people are doing well, and it would be less chances for damages to a building. The 4-unit water damage that we had was $32,000 worth of damage. Those numbers add up, and then that goes against your insurance or what have you. And it's not just homeless people or the addicted people that cause these problems. We've had other people from all walks of life cause problems over the years.
Well, thanks. I appreciate you coming in. I really want to thank you for trying to continue to work in this space, because it is complex, and I appreciate that there's landlords locally that are trying to work with individuals. So thanks for that.
Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see anybody else in the queue. Appreciate you coming to speak from your firsthand experience.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
So we are getting close to where, well, I don't know about anybody else, but I may need a break. I just want to do one sort of last check to see if there's anybody else that wished to present to council before maybe we take a bit of a break for 5-10 minutes and then come back for sort of business arising. Does that sound good, council? Okay. So is there anybody else that wished to present to council on this topic? Okay, if there's not, then we'll just recess for about 5-10 minutes. Everybody can have a stand up and stretch, maybe make it to the washroom sort of break. For those